All right, welcome in everybody to another deep dive.
Always fun.
This time, we're diving deep into location, location, location.
One of the most important things
For businesses.
for absolutely everything.
Yeah. And we've got this great conversation between two entrepreneurs that we're going to be unpacking today.
Yes.
And it's really interesting to hear how they think about location, because it's not just about like, oh, is there an empty storefront or, is the rent cheap?
Right.
There's so much strategy involved
Absolutely.
in what they're talking about.
It's really thinking about the customer.
Yeah, and one of them brought up this super cool example of what's called a Chaya. That's a Japanese tea house that you usually find like on a mountain pass.
Oh, perfect example.
And I was like, that is such a great analogy for how to think about location.
It is, because think about it. You're hiking, you're exhausted, you get to the top of that mountain pass, and then suddenly there's this beautiful little tea house just waiting for you with some refreshments.
It's like they knew exactly what you needed at that moment.
Exactly, and they're anticipating the needs of their customer.
And this is true even for, like regular businesses.
Oh, yeah.
Think about the time you were driving home, you're starving,
Yeah.
you haven't eaten all day, and then like right there
Right, where you need it.
is like your favorite burger place or taco place.
No, it's like magic.
It's like they knew you were going to be hungry at that moment.
But it's not magic.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like the strategic thinking that went into, placing that business there.
Well, that's a perfect segue into one of the other entrepreneurs that we were talking about, who I thought had just an amazing idea.
Okay.
So this person decided to start a takeout barbecue business during the pandemic,
Okay.
which, first of all, good for him. Like talk about like an idea at a time when a lot of restaurants are shut down.
Right.
But what he did is he actually put flyers for his takeout barbecue business at the local laundromat.
Wait, at the laundry.
At the laundromat.
Okay.
Now, just stick with me here, because this is really smart when you think about it.
I'm intrigued.
So people are at the laundromat. They're stuck there.
Yeah.
Their clothes are being washed. They're waiting. They got time on their hands, and a lot of times they're probably juggling, kids and errands, and they don't want to cook.
Right.
Suddenly they see this flyer like, oh my gosh, I could just order some barbecue.
So he's targeting a specific audience
Yeah.
who probably does have that need at that moment.
Exactly.
Okay.
He was very strategic about that, and he
Yeah.
really turned that limitation during the pandemic into this opportunity, because he's like, well, everybody in town has to do their laundry.
Yeah.
So I have a built-in audience right there. And in fact, he even had this concept that his town had like 5,000 people in it. He was like, that's my 5,000-seat restaurant,
I love that. That's so clever.
Yeah, it's like, so what you're saying is he kind of created a location where his ideal customer already was.
Yeah.
Instead
of just being limited to like a physical storefront.
Right.
I love that. So this next one kind of blew my mind.
Okay.
One of the other entrepreneurs that they were talking to decided to open a children's English school,
Okay, yeah.
but she purposely put it near a McDonald's.
Near McDonald's. Okay, help me understand this one.
So at first I was kind of confused, like, why would you put an English school next to a McDonald's?
Yeah.
But she's like, think about it. McDonald's has done all of this market research
Oh,
to figure out where the best place to put a McDonald's is.
right.
Which means like traffic patterns, demographics, all that stuff. And her target market is families with young children.
Of course, because it's an English school for kids.
Yeah.
Smart.
So if McDonald's has already figured out where those families are,
Right.
that's probably a pretty good place to put an English school.
Oh, she's piggybacking on their research.
Totally. And like as an entrepreneur, that makes me think like, what other businesses are doing this kind of like
Yes.
deep market research?
Right. Well, I think that's what's so fascinating about this whole idea location is it's like suddenly you become really observant of your surroundings.
Yeah.
Because now you're not just looking at like, oh, there's a store there, but you're thinking, I wonder why they chose that spot.
Yeah, like what went into that decision?
What's the strategy behind it?
Right. And speaking of strategy, one of the things that they talked about a lot in this conversation is getting an outside perspective.
Oh, that's so important, and we don't do it enough.
Yeah, because when you're like in the thick of your own business,
Absolutely.
you don't see the things that other people might see right away.
You have blind spots.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I was so inspired by this conversation that I actually reached out to one of these entrepreneurs
Oh, wow.
to get feedback on my own art business.
Really?
Yeah, because, I'm so focused on the creative side, sometimes I forget about
Yay.
like the practicalities of like location and,
Where are you going to reach your customers?
Totally. And what she said to me
Yeah.
was so eye-opening.
What really surprised you about her feedback?
I was really surprised by how much she focused on the customer experience.
Interesting.
Like I was so wrapped up in like, how do I display my art
Right.
that I hadn't thought as much about how the location itself
Yeah.
could shape how people interact with the art.
It's that experience again. It's like we're seeing this theme emerge here.
Yeah.
It's not just about the product or service you're offering. It's about how the location itself plays into that.
Yeah, and like how it makes people feel and how accessible it is and all
And how memorable it is.
all those things. So sometimes you just need that outside perspective to
Just to kind of shake things up
totally.
and see things in a new light.
Yeah, and speaking of new light,
Oh.
one of the entrepreneurs said something that I think is the perfect lead into our next point.
All right. I'm all ears.
She said, location isn't just about where you are.
Oh.
It's about where your customers aren't.
Ooh, that's good. Now I got to unpack that.
I know. And we're going to do that right after a quick break, so stay tuned. Location isn't about where you are. It's about where your customers aren't.
Okay, I love that.
Right.
Yeah.
So we were talking about that right before the break.
Yes.
That whole concept of like, okay, if your customers aren't somewhere,
Right.
maybe that's where you should be.
That's a huge opportunity.
Yeah, because maybe there's a reason.
Exactly.
Like maybe there's a need that's not being met
Unmet needs.
in that particular area.
Yeah, and that goes back to what we were talking about earlier about observation, like really starting to pay attention to like, okay, what businesses are around and what businesses are not around.
Yeah.
Because if there's something missing,
Yeah.
there might be a reason for that or there might be an opportunity there.
And it makes me think about the English school example. Like she was saying, like, okay,
right.
there aren't any English schools
In this particular
for
area.
kids in this particular area where there are all these families.
And she knew that because McDonald's had already done the research.
Right, exactly.
So she was like, well, I don't need to reinvent the wheel. I'm just going to,
Look at what they've done.
yeah, piggyback on that.
And be like, okay, that's probably a good spot.
Makes sense.
So it makes you think, like, as an entrepreneur, like, what are all these other places that are doing this kind of market research
Absolutely.
that you could also learn from?
All the time. Like, think about even like shopping malls.
Oh, yeah.
They put a lot of thought into like where to put certain stores.
Right.
Like why is the food court where it is?
Right. Or like, why is the toy store next to the kids' clothing store?
Exactly. Or why are there, 5 coffee shops, but no like healthy juice bars?
Yeah.
There's reasons for those things.
This reminds me of something else the entrepreneurs were talking about is like sometimes you don't get it right the first time.
Oh, absolutely not.
And one of them was saying how like she had actually moved her business
Oh, wow.
like multiple times
Really?
before finding like the perfect spot.
Interesting. So like she was experimenting.
Yeah. And she was like, every time I moved,
Yeah.
I learned something.
You learn something from those mistakes or those,
Yeah.
miscalculations.
Well, like the first location, she realized she was too far off the beaten path.
Okay.
Like nobody was really going there.
Not enough foot traffic.
The second location, I think it was too small.
Okay.
And then the third
She
location
was just right.
was like the Goldilocks location.
What Goldilocks spot?
Like it was just right.
I love that story because it just shows you that, sometimes you have to
Try things.
be willing to pivot, and adjust
Yeah.
based on what you're learning.
And like not be afraid to like fail.
Yeah. Or not even fail, but just like, make adjustments along the way.
Because like you're always learning as an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. You have to be.
So this whole conversation about location has really like blown my mind in terms of thinking about it so strategically.
It's not just about finding an empty storefront.
Right.
And like slapping up a sign hoping for the best.
Yeah. There's so much more to it.
It's a whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
It's like you're considering your customers, you're considering the community, you're considering the other businesses around.
Yeah. And even like, the vibe of a place.
Absolutely.
Like what is it like to be in that particular area?
Yeah. Does it fit with your brand?
Right.
Does it fit with the feeling you're trying to create for your customers?
Yeah.
It's so much more than just, the physical space.
So to wrap up this deep dive, I think like the biggest takeaway for me is like,
what's the one thing you want listeners to remember?
just be observant.
Yes.
Like really pay attention to the world around you.
Observe your surroundings.
And look at the businesses that are doing well
Yes.
and the ones that aren't doing well and think about why.
Ask yourself why.
Yeah, because there's always a reason.
Absolutely. And you can learn so much from that. Whether you're an entrepreneur or just someone who's interested in how the world works,
It's like a puzzle
Yeah.
you're trying to figure out.
And there are clues everywhere.
Yeah.
You just have to pay attention.
So pay attention, everybody.
That's right.
That's our deep dive for today.
Thanks for joining us.
Until next time. 3 times she moved
Wow.
before she found the right spot.
That's amazing.
And she was saying that each move taught her something.
Okay.
So it wasn't like wasted time.
Gotcha.
You know, it was like each one was like a stepping stone.
Makes sense.
Like the first location, she was too far off the beaten path.
Yeah.
The second one was too small.
Okay.
And then the third one.
The third one was just right.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And she was like, oh, that's when I knew.
This is it.
This is it.
I found it.
Like, this is the spot.
Wow. And to be willing to, move 3 times.
Yeah.
That takes guts.
Yeah, it does.
And a lot of entrepreneurs don't have that. They think, oh, I got to stick with this first location. Maybe it'll get better.
Right.
But she was like, no. If it's not working, it's not working.
Yeah.
I got to keep trying until I find the right one.
I feel like this whole conversation has been like reframing how I think about location.
Absolutely.
Because it's so much more than just like, oh, is it a busy street or, what's the rent?
Right.
It's really about like understanding the nuances of your business.
Yes. And understanding the nuances of the area.
Yeah.
Like the community you're serving, the people who are there.
Right.
The other businesses around you.
Yeah. And even just like, what does it feel like to be in that space? Like, is it a good vibe?
Is it inviting? Is
it welcoming?
Yeah.
So I guess to kind of wrap things up for today,
yeah,
I'm thinking like the biggest takeaway for me is like, don't be afraid to like
ask for help.
Experiment.
And
like try things.
Don't be afraid to fail.
Yeah. And like be observant.
Yes.
Like really look around you.
And be curious. Ask questions like, why is that business doing well?
Yeah.
Why is that business not doing well?
Yeah, like what's going on there?
Exactly. So yeah, be curious. And
be willing to experiment.
Totally.
And you'll find your perfect spot.
Awesome. It's out there.
That's our deep dive for today.
Thanks for joining us.
Until next time.